in Steel Division 2 of all time. Division that I had the most success with ever, when I went on a 19 win streak, just to be stopped just in the last game that I needed to the 20 win streak. It was a really big disappointment, but still, making it 90 wins in a row was quite a lot of fun, and there's a reason why it was this division. Because it was a really strong division that is also slightly underrated by a lot of players. So what we're gonna do is give you an overlook and then also give you a deep dive into every tab and the reasons why I pick stuff as I do. And the first start is Vanguard. And Vanguard currently is on the weaker end of incomes. So I think there's only a handful, if not maybe only 30 VDV, which you want to play as Vanguard. You could still also obviously choose Maverick for this deck as well. But with the heavy rush that you get, I think it's still playable as Vanguard, though obviously you don't get as much of an advantage as you got back in the day. And I still think Vanguard should be slightly buffed. But hey, hopefully we will get there, and at that point, 30 VDV will just only get better. And the division has gotten better over the last couple of patches once more. And so here you see all my stuff. You can find the link in the description down below, the deck code to this deck as well, in my deck list. And let's start in the Recon tab. As in the Recon tab, you already have a couple of choices to make. As with the radio mortars, which we'll see in the artillery tab, you want to have radios. And you could get some radios here with the Decklist or the Dushka. Issue at the Dushka is that it is slightly too pricey. If it would only cost you 10 points, I would go 100% for it, for cheap radio at the front line. For 15 points, I feel like it's not quite worthwhile because you don't gonna use it for its Dushka gun. You're not gonna use it as a combat unit. So just for the radio, paying 15 points, not really worthwhile. And the Decklist are pretty efficient for its 20 points, giving you smoke and 9-man firepower. The issue with these rather is their availability, as they come in 2, 4, 6, and the 1-star veterancy doesn't really matter too much. So what I picked instead are the snipers, always good, and you need some long-range firepower with this deck, and the T70 Veteran, which also got buffed lately in price with the light tank buff, so that's why I went for this. Before, I had the Decklist Veteran in B-phase. Still a choice you can do if you feel like you might need more radios. So this is my Recon tab, and these are the 3 options I would say you have here, with the Dushka sadly being a bit too pricey. Let's move on to the Infantry tab. In the Infantry tab, you have your unique unit, and that unique unit is an absolute beast. That unique unit is called the Decklist. And sure, its stats are not super impressive. It's an 8-man squadron, so slightly under strength, and it has only PPSHs and an anti-tank grenade. But in this deck, this is all you need. Because for 15 points, it's one of the cheapest squads in the game, and it has the most firepower for every 15-point squad in the game. Sure, you gotta get close to the enemy to use that firepower, but you have an amazing tool in the artillery tab called Smoke Off Map to get your guys in there. And this deck might be the strongest in CQC combat due to the Decklist combined with the Sturmoviki Rocks, which now for 30 points are really viable, and you get 2 cards of them. For 35 points they were overpriced, but now you can use them quite effectively. You even have some other options that you might want to use. Maybe you want to use a cheaper flamethrower with the Decklist sub-parry. Sadly, not the greatest availability though. Or also using the tank Decklist. As you can see, I use them as well. And to get at least a bit like long-range firepower, I use the Guardia and the Decklist DT. The Decklist DT being quite solid here with the LMG. And as the DT can be used on move and shoot, you can also have these in your mix of infantry if you clump them up and just let them move with them and still shoot whilst on the move. Leaders, I don't use any here, as the choices you got sadly are all slightly underwhelming, as they are all too expensive or not quite good enough. The Sturm already maybe still being the best choice if you want to use one, as They come with 3 availability, which is decent. They have smoke and 6 men, so they are somewhat survivable. But I felt like I need all the infantry cards I can get, as they also come with free veterancy. I don't feel like too much of an issue, and in CQC combat, keeping your leader alive is not always that easy. And we will have the beefy 10-man leaders in the artillery tab to help out with cheaper leader options as well, like slot-wise, as obviously these slots are getting pretty pricey in the rear. In the tank tab, I go for the fast options. You could go for the Valentine, which is a pretty good tank killer, as it has an insane rate of fire, but its HE shells are lackluster, and it's a really slow tank. 24 kilometers on the road is abysmal, and this deck is all about the rush, right, with the Vanguard. So you rather want to use the T-34s, 76s, the 2 cards that you get, plus the leader, to get you through there. The Valentine leader has 3 availability, but these Valentines are just not great. The Valentine 3s don't feel that good at all. So I'd rather have the T-34 Comrade. Only get 2. You could also take them in B, but I like them in A to have 8 T-34s in A, and then 12 in B to help me out there. Availability pattern here is not super great. You could maybe go for 8 more in B with 1 star veterancy, but I'd rather have the numbers here at that point. In the support tab, you don't have anything super great, but you have Maxims, which give you more long-range fire support, and your slots are relatively cheap. So that's why I filled this out quite a lot. One option that you could change out, but I'm just not good with them, is changing out the OB, maybe, or one of the Niki Maxims for an ARM-38 with its 800 meter range. These mortars could be helpful as well, as they also could help out with a bit of smoke. But yeah, to get your CQC units even closer and get even more smoke. But I rather have the OB-25s to have some more light anti-tank and also a bit more long-range capabilities. So yeah, this is a choice that you can make here. Leader-wise, I would go with the slightly armored one. And that is a bit faster. But actually, I just realized this is stupid. Not just go for this one, as this one is actually faster. yeah, we should just go for this one. Sure, it has an MG that can reveal itself, but also it's an MG that can maybe shoot at a Panzerschreck or so, getting close to you in the rear, and anything else you don't need to worry about. These leaders, yeah, they're infantry leader, but if you want to have camaraderie, with this deck you always have to switch positions, you always move forward, move backward, so you want to have a leader that is mobile. So I'd rather use these BA-20 or the M3A1 for that part. The M3A1 has slightly more frontal armor, but I guess that doesn't really matter. In the anti-tank tab, there's also a couple of options. Faust Niki, sadly, not good. I mean, they have a DT, but that isn't even worse because that reveals them. And the Faust Patron is a horrible, horrible weapon. Like, you gotta get really close and then you only might not even penetrate everything instantaneously. Accuracy is solid, but also 8 damage means that you don't one-shot any medium tanks. So that's a pretty bad combo for the Faust Nikis. I used the BTRs. You sadly have to use them at 1 star veterancy, so you only get 4, but you still want to be the fastest guy on the battlefield. So these allow you to get even more territory, and if you combine them with smoke off map, you can also get them into cheesy positions as well. So that's why I use the BTRs. The VG-VOD version obviously doesn't come in fast transports. Not the biggest fans out of the VG-VOD teams outside of 358 where they get the TNT. As an anti-tank grenade doesn't really feel that helpful. Especially as you get a hell of a lot of anti-tank grenades with your Dejan Nikis anyways. The smoke, yeah, it's nice, but you already get enough smoke as is. And the BTRs bring them as well. So I just go for the normal BTRs here. Whilst with the other options, I want to go for something that can kill heavier tanks, plus having a fast option with the M42. And the Su-76 here is really important, because that brings you the radio. And especially since if you don't take these, you really need these in A phase for some radios. Like, they don't look too great stats-wise, but they're decent. But really what you want to do with them is getting them into a solid position and maybe not even have them as a fighting vehicle, like, yeah, have them as a somewhat unit that can intervene at some points when they get attacked, but really use them for the radio, so that your 120mm mortars, which will come, can be more effective. AA tab is really simple. You can just go with the 37mm. You shouldn't use them in CIS-2 though, the 42s though. You should use them in Störtebeckers. As I play Vanguard, I just, as you can see, use 2NB with 2-star veterancy, 1NA with 2-star veterancy, 2NA with 1-star veterancy, so that I get more damage on enemy planes. As I also believe in my ability on using the air tab. If you play Maverick or so, you might want to switch it to 2 and 4, but as you lose out quite a bit in availability, but I feel like 4 37mm in this deck is usually the maximum amount I bring, as I buy as many planes anyways, so I usually don't struggle with enemy planes, and 2-star veterancy is a big difference, as the accuracy on AA guns matters a hell of a lot because of how fast it stacks up. So every point you have already means you get way faster to high accuracy numbers, and high accuracy numbers means you get kills way better with these. You could also go for the 85mm, also an option, but I just find it a bit too slow for this deck. Though it gives you another option of something that can shoot at enemy tanks, enemy medium tanks, but the Russian 85 is not the best anti-tank. First of all, it doesn't have the 2000-meter range of the other big guns, and it also doesn't have quite the penetration. Like, you need to get close to 1500 meter for the APCR, which also only has 4 damage, so you're not gonna two-shot any medium tanks with it, or heavy tanks. You need to have 3 penetrations with this, so overall, gunner is a bit in a limbo, and I'd just rather just have the 37mm that do the job better. In the artillery tab, we have a couple of things as well. You could, for example, another option you can do here for getting a radio, if you don't feel like you need as many mortars or don't use the Katyusha, you can use the artillerists as a cheap, really cheap recon unit that also gets you forward radio. Like, this might even be the better option here, as you still get the 3 120mm mortars, which are a lot better now, by the way, as they have 10 more HE shells, so chances that they pay off with just being called in is a lot bigger now, as they have 2 more salvos to fire than before. And you also can now let them shoot through A phase without having to bring an A phase supply card, so you can move the supply card into B phase, so you have more supply. That also allows you then to use Katyushas, which is the other unit I use here. It's a trade-off versus the Su-76, B4 obviously too expensive to be used here. Su-76 not really doing the damage, has radio as well, so benefits from similar things, or the more 120mm mortars, which deal a lot of damage, and thanks to the radio can be really accurate. Together with the leader, the artillerists, or some recon, or the SU, you also have an okay amount of radios for Soviet deck in this deck. And the Katyushas are here to stun anti-tank guns with a fast blow, or stun AA guns with a fast blow to allow your tanks or your big air tab to move through. The air tab here is a Proto Stocker air tab. It's fully stacked out and it's full of goodies. You have really cheap bombers with the L2 that also can be used to kill off enemy planes, like recon planes. You have a U2 that is here because it's solid recon, you get 6 availability, and it has 4 50kg bombs which annihilate any anti-tank gun position or support gun position. So if you have one of these starting, the enemy has to buy something against your plane. And there's nothing that is cheaper than 20 points to annihilate that plane. So you have the option of just buying one for 20 points. If the enemy ignores it, it kills something and gives you some recon. And if he doesn't ignore it, if the enemy buys something, they will be punished because they bought something that's more expensive than 20 points. So even if they kill it, they still had that investment that they now have to get on top of. So there's always that mind game with 30 VDV. Do you start with a lot of airplanes? Like, sometimes I use the U2, and then also buy a Yak 19 in my starting setup. And then once the enemy has their plane out, I get my Yak 90 out to kill it off as well. Sometimes I just start with U2 to bait out the enemy fighter, have more on the ground due to it, as the enemy doesn't get a minute 1 unit out, like ground unit buy-in out, because they invested it into the fighter. So I have more reinforcements coming in, so I can push them over that way. Well, yeah. Or I just use a really heavy air start with a U2, a IL2, and a Yak 90 to really destroy the enemy in the air and get them to get completely screwed by my air spam. The IL2M is necessary because you want to kill, and the IL237 because you don't have any stuff against heavy tanks other than this. Really, like, you have your Cis-2s, which can do a bit of work, but that's it, and you don't get that many. You sadly don't get a second card. The second card of Cis-2s would make this deck really a lot better. But you have 5 anti-tank planes. The IL-2s have the better availability compared to the IL-237s in A and B. Like, they only get 1 in B, so they only get 1/3 extra, whilst this doubles. It goes from 1 to 2, so that's why the setup is like this. You could also just rely on 37mm, but I feel like the ones with anti-tank rockets are nice because they also can be used against enemy planes. They can be used as a ground strafer a bit as well with the 23mm. Then we have some big boy bombers as well in B phase that can pin down big positions and can be used to completely overwhelm the enemy, as you get a lot of planes. So even if the enemy has AA, if they have too little, you can overwhelm it with this as well. The 37mm of the Yak 90 can be used for ground strafing, for example, as well. It's a plane that you have to get used to somewhat. It doesn't maneuver as some other fighters, and it's not the fastest. It's decently speeded, but it's not super simple to use, I feel. And the 37mm also only has 600-meter range, sadly, so you have to be a bit careful. But overall, a really fun air tab that has good potential against any deck out there. Sometimes you have to be really careful though. So if the enemy has Fokker Wolves or has a G55, like if you play against fourth, you might not want to rely on your air tab too much. In those cases, use your smoke off map, the unit that is the most important in this deck, and that's why I keep it for the last. We talked about the artillery tab already, but the thing about the smoke off map that a lot of people don't know is yet a smoke off map, and that first doesn't sound too amazing, right? I mean, you can see the use cases and so on, but the thing is, you get 6 shots instead of 3 shots or 2 shots with other off maps. So you can 6 times in the game make a zone on the map your kind of zone, forcing the enemy to find a CQC battle on the battlefield when they thought it would be a long range or mid-range area, and then you bring in your Desert Nikis and co to destroy the enemy there. Especially useful in areas where as I said, the enemy doesn't have positioned CQC units, like in a half open town where they have only like mid-range infantry, like Panzer Grenadiers. You put the smoke in there, and then their units are completely out of position because from one moment to the next, this has become a 100-meter range area, and then your Desert Nikis sweep in and just completely annihilate the area. And afterwards, the enemy has to push you back. And Desert Nikis on defense are pretty nice because they, first of all, don't reveal themselves too fast. You can't push them with tanks too easily because they have anti-tank grenades. And if any infantry comes close to them, they still have a lot of firepower. So they're not that easy to dislodge, even though they're a 15-point unit. And with the 6 loads, you can do that so often for a 100-point investment. And the enemy always has to be scared. So this is in most of my starts. On some maps I don't start with it outright. I sometimes just have a normal start. If I think the map already allows for enough CQC and so on, I just start normally with other stuff, as it's still 1/7 of your starting income, obviously. But with the cheap infantry, you already are really cost efficient. So you don't have to worry about that too much. And yeah, if you start with it, it can be really powerful. But with its 6 barrages, I don't feel like you need it in B phase. That's why I like this deck in Vanguard. Like, you don't need more of these. You're never gonna use 12 and for sure not 18 shots of that smoke off map. Like in in funny team games you can do some stuff with that, I guess, some shenanigans, but in 1v1, all you need is 6 barrages, and that's already more than enough. Like, this often lasts till C phase. If a game goes into C phase, I still have the smoke off map. Obviously, you want to keep it alive, and you want to keep it moving around the map as well, so always keep it a bit back, so that you can reposition it, and then surprise your enemy on another flank, and make that a CQC area, where from one moment to the next, the balance of whose units are better there completely shifts. So you always want to keep it fluid with the 30 VDV. And I hope you enjoyed my deep dive into my favorite deck. And yeah, let me know if you want to see more of these kinds of videos of me diving into my decks. And let me know if you also are a 30 VDV enjoyer, and if you played Vanguard, or if you just played the current meta of Maverick, which is totally viable as well. I've seen a couple people playing it balanced. I don't think it leans in that direction. It has a bit too expensive infantry tabs, and the not great availability on a lot of stuff for it. And the B4 is just not quite good enough. It's big artillery, but it's a bit too easy to kill, with it being a vehicle, not a 10-man crew unit. So yeah, I hope you had a lot of fun. If you liked it, consider leaving a like, consider leaving a comment, and see you all next time. Bye bye.